Imagine for a moment all the stuff that gets delivered to you, or, the materials for buildings going up around us. Everything from your online shopping to huge construction supplies, it all gets moved around, often by these powerful machines, forklifts. But have you ever stopped to think what it actually takes to operate one? Safely, legally, especially here in the UK. Today, we're doing a deep dive into exactly that, the world of forklift training and certification. And honestly, forget what you might think you know about getting a license, because for forklifts in the UK, it's not quite that simple. That's kind of our first big realization as we start unpacking this.
Yeah, it's a really interesting area, mainly because that whole licensing thing isn't like getting a car license at all. It's much more nuanced. Our main source today, a guide from Angus Lift Trucks, does a great job of clearing up the specifics. It's really useful for anyone thinking about this as a career or maybe needed to get certified.
Right. So our mission today is to cut through the jargon, sort of bust a few myths, and give you a clear picture of how forklift operation works in the UK. We'll uncover some frankly surprising details. What training really involves, the skills you pick up, the sheer variety of machines out there, and, how you actually get started in this pretty vital industry. Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's tackle that first surprise. The license. When people talk about a forklift license, they're usually thinking like DVLA, government-issued card, right? But the sources make it clear there isn't one single national standard license like that in the UK. So if it's not a license, what is it?
It's basically all about accredited training. You don't go to a government agency for a forklift license. Instead, you have to attend a training program that's been accredited by a recognized body. The certificate you get when you pass, that's your proof. It shows you've met the standards for safety and operation.
Accredited, so who does the accrediting? Good question. To make sure the training is high quality and consistent, the Health and Safety Executive, the HSE, they legally recognize certain organizations. There are about 6 of them, names like AITT, RTITB, Lantra, and PORS. You might see these logos on certificates. They set the standards, they audit the trainers. So even though there are different providers, these bodies ensure everyone's working to the same rigorous safety level. It's sort of a quality control system.
Okay, that makes sense. Different providers, but standardized quality. But here's something that really jumped out at me, something that shifts the responsibility. Even if you turn up to a new job with a shiny certificate from one of these accredited places, your employer still has a legal duty to train you for their specific site, their machines. It's under Section 2 of the Health and Safety at Work Act, apparently. So it's not just like good practice, it's the law.
Absolutely. That's spot on. Even if you're an experienced operator, think about it. Every workplace is different. The layout of the warehouse, the specific forklift models they use, the kind of stuff that you're lifting, how busy it is with people walking around. All these things mean you need site-specific familiarization and safety briefings. An employer skipping that, yeah, they could definitely be falling short of their legal duties. It's about proving competence in that specific context.
Right. So for you listening, whether you want to be an operator or maybe you manage a team using forklifts or you're just interested in workplace safety, knowing this is actually quite powerful. It means you can ask the right questions, make sure that comprehensive training happens, and, really put safety first. Okay, so we've cleared up the legal bits and the accreditation. Let's get into some practical questions people often have. First one. Age. How old do you need to be?
The HSE guidance is pretty firm here. If you're under the minimum school leaving age that's 16, you should never be operating a forklift. Full stop. In practice, though, most companies, most training providers, they set the minimum age at 18. And there's a specific rule for places like ports, you have to be 18. That's tied into the, generally stricter safety rules in those kinds of environments.
Got it. 16 is the absolute minimum, but realistically, it's usually 18, especially for certain jobs. Okay, what about cost? If you meet the age requirement, what's the damage to the wallet for training?
It varies quite a bit, actually. If you're a complete beginner, a novice, you're probably looking at somewhere between, say, 200 and 800 pounds per person for a full course. What makes the difference? Well, how much experience you already have, if any, the specific type of forklift, because some are more complex, and just how long the course takes. If you're just doing a refresher or maybe converting your skills to a different type of machine, that can be much cheaper, sometimes around 100 pounds or so.
Okay, now here's one I think might surprise people. Do you need a normal car driver's license to get a forklift certificate?
Well, yeah, this is a common one. The answer is generally no. Not if you're only operating the forklift off-road. So think inside warehouses, factory floors, private construction sites, yards, anywhere that isn't a public highway. For that, you don't need a car license. However, if the job involves driving the forklift on a public road, maybe between sites or something, then yes, you absolutely need a full UK driver's license. And the forklift itself needs to be registered with the DVLA, taxed, insured, just like a car. It's also worth remembering forklifts steer differently, usually with the back wheels. Takes a bit of getting used to.
Right, so crucial difference between on-site and on-road use. Good distinction. Okay, so you get this certificate after your training. Does it expire? Do you have to renew it like a passport or a driving license?
Well, the certificate itself technically doesn't have an expiry date printed on it. But, and this is important, UK law and HSE guidance strongly recommend that operators get refresher training every 3 to 5 years. Things change, right? New safety guidelines come out, maybe there are updates to the machines, best practices evolve. So the refresher keeps you current. But here's a key point from the sources. Employers aren't actually legally required to provide this refresher. It's recommended, not mandated. So if you need one, you might have to arrange it yourself. Cost-wise, a refresher is typically around that £100 mark for a day's training.
That's a really important nuance. The certificate doesn't expire, but refreshers are highly recommended, though not legally forced on employers.
Good to know.
And speaking of keeping skills current, this leads us nicely into the sheer variety of machines. Because, as you said, a forklift isn't just a forklift. The range is kind of amazing, and our source mentions that each type often needs its own specific training, right?
Exactly. Getting certified on, say, a standard counterbalance forklift, the most common type you see, doesn't mean you're automatically qualified to jump on a completely different machine. The way they're designed, how they handle, the environments they work in, it can all be vastly different. So yeah, specific training for specific types is usually necessary. It's a very specialized field.
Okay, let's touch on a few examples from the source material, just to give people an idea of this variety. What about the reach forklift?
Ah, the reach truck. Yeah, these are essential in warehouses with narrow aisles. They have wheels directly under the operator, and the forks can extend forward or reach into the racking. This lets them turn in really tight spaces, maximizing how much stuff you can store. But controlling that reach mechanism and maneuvering in confined spaces, that definitely needs its own dedicated training. Your standard counterbalance certificate won't cover it.
Right. Or how about something like a telescopic handler? You see those on building sites sometimes, looking a bit like small cranes.
Yeah, often called telehandlers or maybe zoom booms. They're incredibly versatile. They have this long, extendable arm, the boom, which can lift loads up high or reach over obstacles. You see them a lot in construction, obviously, but also in agriculture. Managing the load at height, understanding the stability limits, it's a completely different ballgame to a standard forklift.
Makes sense. And then there are the ones for really, really tight spaces, like the VNA.
V&A, very narrow aisle. These are designed for warehouses packed super densely. They often have features like wire guidance systems to steer them perfectly straight in the aisle. And some are man-up designs.
And up.
Yeah, where the operator's cap actually lifts up with the forks. So if you're picking stock from a very high shelf, you're right up there, level with it, giving you a clear view. Operating safely and efficiently way up high in a narrow space, that requires very specific skills and training.
Wow, okay. And what about this one, the multi-directional forklift? Sounds complex.
They are pretty sophisticated. Think of it as combining features of maybe a counterbalance, a side loader, and maybe even a VNA. They can move forwards, backwards, sideways, diagonally, which makes them brilliant for handling long, awkward loads, like pipes or timber in tight spaces. They can switch from indoor warehouse use to outdoor yard work. But yeah, the controls and the way they move mean you definitely need specific training. A VNA license wouldn't cover this, for example.
Okay, one more. The vehicle-mounted truck lift. The source called it the donkey.
Ah, yes, that's a common nickname. These are the forklifts you often see carried on the back of a delivery lorry. The driver can unload it themselves and then use it to unload the truck's cargo at the destination, even if there's no loading dock. Very handy for construction sites or delivering heavy materials. Because they're often used to lift things quite high, maybe onto scaffolding or near roof lines, the safety training focuses heavily on stability and avoiding overhead hazards like power lines.
It's incredible, the range. So the big takeaway for you listening is becoming a forklift operator isn't just one single skill. It can be a gateway to lots of different specialized roles across so many industries: construction, warehousing, logistics, agriculture, each needing its own specific expertise.
Okay, so beyond just passing the test and getting that certificate, what do you actually learn during the training? Our source really stresses it's not just about steering and lifting, it's massively focused on safety, precision, and really understanding the machine.
That's exactly right. The core training covers things like, obviously, basic operation, how to drive it, steer it, use the control smoothly, but also critically, understanding the machine's capabilities. What's its safe lifting capacity? What are its limitations? How does the load center affect stability? You learn detailed pre-use inspection processes, checking hydraulics, tires, chains, guards, and of course, safety protocols are drilled in constantly. You'll do live demonstrations, practice maneuvering, learn exactly what each lever does, tilt, raise, lower, side shift maybe. It's very hands-on, and the safety aspect seems paramount. The source mentioned a pretty stark statistic, something like 8,000 reported forklift accidents a year in the UK, and it stated that the operator is the forklift's #1 safety feature. So getting that safety training right isn't just ticking a box, it's literally about preventing injury or worse. What are some of those really critical safety takeaways that stick with you from the training?
Well, I think one of the absolute fundamentals they hammer home is just constant awareness. Prevention, basically.
Yeah.
Always knowing what's around you, pedestrians, obstacles, other vehicles, monitoring your speed, especially when turning or loaded,
Hmm.
watching your load position. The training really emphasizes that it only takes a split second of distraction for something serious to happen.
That makes total sense. What about something more specific? Maybe something that feels counterintuitive but is vital.
Okay, yeah, the tipping over procedure. This is probably the single most critical piece of safety advice. If the forklift starts to tip sideways, your first instinct might be to jump clear. But the training tells you don't jump. Instead, you brace yourself. Hold onto the steering wheel firmly, plant your feet, and this is key. Lean away from the direction of the fall. Lean into the machine towards the high side. The idea is to stay inside the protective structure, the overhead guard or cab. Jumping often leads to being crushed by the falling machine. It's a hard instruction to follow instinctively, but it saves lives.
Wow. Okay, that's incredibly important advice. Leaning away from the fall.
Exactly. And other things too, like load management. It sounds simple, just picking things up, but there's a lot to it. Learning to position the heaviest part of the load nearest the front wheels, the mast, for stability. How to spread the weight on the forks. Recognizing the signs of an overload, like the back wheels lifting slightly. That's a major warning sign. And then there are the ingrained habits, like always using 3 points of contact when getting on or off, 2 hands and a foot, or 2 feet and a hand, not using the steering wheel as a handhold. And the proper shutdown. Forks lowered, parking brake on, engine off, key out. These become automatic through practice.
It really sounds like the training goes into immense detail. It raises the question, how does learning all this stuff prepare you? Not just to scrape through a test, but to actually be a genuinely confident, skilled, and crucially safe operator out there in the real world. It's about embedding those habits, isn't it?
Precisely. It's about building muscle memory for the safe procedures, so you don't even have to think about them in a stressful situation.
So let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about actually getting a job. What if you're listening and thinking, okay, I'm interested, but I've got zero experience? Is it realistic to try and get hired?
Yes, definitely. The source material suggests that some employers are willing to offer training as part of the job, especially if you show potential in other ways. Maybe your resume shows experience in related areas, logistics, stocking shelves, working on a farm, anything that involves spatial awareness, maybe some manual handling, or working safely around machinery. It also helps to highlight that you're physically capable, good eyesight, hearing, full range of movement. These are practical requirements.
Okay, so highlighting relevant skills, even if not direct forklift experience, can help.
Exactly. And here's a really useful piece of advice from the source. They generally advise against just going out and paying for a generic forklift course yourself, hoping it will land you a job. Unless you know specifically what type of machine and what kind of workplace you're aiming for. Why? Because the best training is tailored. Training on a counterbalance might not help much if the job needs a VNA operator. So the advice is often, find the job opportunity first, then get the specific training needed, potentially through the employer. Don't waste money on training that might not be relevant.
That's a really practical tip. Don't spend on generic training if you can get specific training through an employer.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's say you are certified, you've done the training. How do you keep track of your certificate or your license number? Is there some central database you can check?
No, and that comes back to what we said earlier about no single national license. There isn't a big government database of all forklift operators like there is for drivers. Your proof of certification, your unique operator number, if you have one, will be on the certificate paper or digital issued by the training provider who accredited your course. So if you lose it, the first place to go is back to that original training provider. They should have records. What if you switch jobs and can't track down the old certificate? Well, a new employer might ask you to do a reassessment or even retrain you on their specific equipment, which, as we discussed, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It acts as a valuable refresher anyway.
Right, so keep hold of that certificate, but if you lose it, go back to the source, the training provider. Good to know. This really helps clarify the practical steps for starting out and managing your qualifications in this field. Okay, so we have covered a huge amount today in this deep dive. Let's quickly recap. We've learned there's no single national forklift license in the UK, like for a car. Instead, it's all about training from an accredited provider. That certificate is your proof. We've looked at the cost, maybe 200 to 800 pounds for a novice. The age limit's usually 18 in practice. And that's a surprising fact. You often don't need a car driver's license for operating on private sites, only if you go on public roads. Plus, we've seen just how specialized forklifts can be. Reach trucks, telehandlers, VNAs, each needing specific skills.
Yeah, and I think connecting it all up, what becomes clear is that being a forklift operator isn't just, driving around a warehouse. It's a genuinely skilled, really vital role. Think about supply chains, construction projects, manufacturing, in short. They all rely heavily on these machines and the people who operate them safely and efficiently. That detailed training we talked about, the focus on safety protocols, it's all there to ensure things run smoothly and, most importantly, safely for everyone.
Absolutely. This deep dive really shows that a forklift operator isn't just some random driver. They're highly trained specialists, crucial to keeping our economy moving. So here's a final thought for you to take away. Next time you see a forklift whizzing around a warehouse or lifting materials on a building site, maybe pause for a second. Think beyond just the machine. Consider the skills, the intense training, the constant safety awareness that goes into every single lift, every single turn. And maybe consider how mastering those kinds of specialized practical skills could potentially open up career doors you hadn't even thought about, hidden within the essential infrastructure that keeps our world running.